Hello, y'all. Welcome to this online class. For these classes, what I want to do is I want to give biblical, as the title suggests, biblical categories for reading Paul. Now, I'll be honest with you, what I'm doing is I'm pulling from a couple chapters from this awesome book. It's from Douglas Campbell. It's called Pauline Dogmatics, The Triumph of God's Love. And this book has been shaping me, shaping my faith, shaping my understanding for reading Paul. And I want to share some of what I'm learning with y'all. That'll hopefully help you when you're reading Paul's letters and interpreting his letters. Because we never go to the text bare, right? We never read scripture with nothing in our minds prior to that, right? We always go to scripture with categories. We could call them theological categories. And so when we read the text, we are reading it through the lens of these categories. And so what Doug Campbell does in his book, and he's at Duke Divinity School, New Testament scholarship scholar, and he's been a faithful interpreter of Paul for almost 30 years. And so what he's doing in that book and in all his other books is kind of trying to distill and make accessible these categories that helped him read Paul, and that would help us read Paul. So I want to go through these categories with y'all in these lessons. So there'll be 5 more of these videos after this one. This one's just the introduction. And so these categories, and I say biblical categories because they come from the Bible. So it's not just categories from whatever, from philosophy, from other theories, and then you read it onto the text. No, they come from the scripture witness themselves, right? And they come actually from Paul. These are his categories, and it helps us read his letters, because we have to read Paul, all his letters, and we'll go through some of them in a bit. And you can't just read one letter and say, that's Paul, that's what he believes. No, you actually have to read all his letters. The problem is that they're all written for different reasons, in different contexts. A lot of overlap happens. A lot of his thoughts in one letter influence another. And so you got to read them together. And so when you read it together, that you don't get confused, you don't get lost in the huge mind of Paul, I think it's helpful to have these categories. And so to introduce them, what we're going to go through, we'll go through each one of these per video. But the categories are love, or agape, grace or gift, charis in the Greek, faith or faithfulness, faithful obedience, trust, or allegiance, and that's pistis in the Greek, peace or eirene, and finally joy or kata. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double star, and double underline love, because all this is the source for the rest of them, right? And so all these things, categories 2 through 5, are caught up and rooted in category 1, which is love. This is the foundation of Paul's theology, because it was the foundation of Jesus's theology, right? Paul follows Jesus. He's not creating this on his own. He's a disciple, first and foremost, of Jesus Christ. And so categories 2 to 5 find their expression, are the full expression of category 1. Without the 1, you don't have these. And you can't have these fully without this. And I mean, that's blatant. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 13. Paul says, the greatest of all these is love. And so that's how we're going to think about it. So the next video is going to be really important and foundational for understanding the rest of these categories. Now, also in this intro, I think it's good to introduce, which I'm sure you all know. Just go to any table of contents in the Bible and you'll see. But these are there are things called canons, right? And our whole Bible is called a canon. It just means all the letters, all the books, everything that the church agrees upon as canon or as scripture. And so the whole Bible is considered canon. But there's canons within the canon, right? And depending on who you're talking to, these canons might differ. And so for Pauline scholarship, a lot have their own canons. But generally speaking, and these are in order of found in the Bible, not in order of when he wrote these letters, right? Because Paul's earliest letters are probably down here, and Romans might be one of his last letters. And so these are the ones that most people agree upon are for sure from Paul, right? Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, and Philemon. This is called the 10-letter canon of Paul. And so I put this blue asterisk next to the 3 that are disputed, right? Because not all Paul scholars agree on the same thing. And so it's either a 10-letter canon. The ones that don't have an asterisk are like for sure, without a doubt, all Paul scholars say for sure these 7, that's Paul. These are disputed, but Campbell argues that they are Paul. And then these bottom 3 are in a red square because this author, I'm not saying this, so don't get me in trouble, but this author doesn't believe they are authentically Pauline letters. That's why they're in a red box. And that's 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. That's going to go far beyond the scope of what I want to do with this. So if you're truly curious and you highly disagree with this, I would suggest looking at Doug Campbell, same author, his book called Framing Paul, an epistolatory biography. And it's there where he lays out his arguments for what is Paul, what isn't Paul, whatever. So I'll let you go deal with that. So we're not going to deal with it. But regardless, these letters are a good bunch in finding these categories and determining what was Paul all about. And again, I'm basically just distilling what I get from this book and what we find in Scripture. And so we're going to look at these categories: love, grace, faith, peace, and joy. That'll hopefully be a good lens as we look into Paul's letters and interpret him faithfully. So, thank you.